I was recently diagnosed with autism. Let's chat about it. I've seen people do this before and it's worked well for them, so I'm gonna bank on it working for me. A bit of a different atmosphere than I typically am. I've kind of been all over the place on how to make this video, like what I want to say, how I want to format it. It's got in my head a little bit. I've also been sick. I'm still a bit sick. If you watched my last video, I got sick a second time, but I've really wanted to talk about this. I've had my diagnosis now for a month and a half, almost 2 months, and it's been very eye-opening. If this were like 10 years ago, I would have never thought this would be a diagnosis I'd receive. So I've learned a lot, not just through the diagnostic process, but leading up to it. So considering I'm just really in my head about it, I'm going back and forth on what I want to do, I thought I would just get out here, start talking, maybe split this into like 3 different segments. First is going to be sort of like what made me think I may have autism, talk about some of the stereotypes, how they may not be so accurate, especially for women. Segment 2 is going to be about the diagnostic process itself, how I went about that, what it looked like, and then segment 3 will be what's next. You know, what does that mean for my life, how I'm feeling about it, all that kind of stuff. So this segment here, once I reach my destination, which is those little benches over there, we will chat about, again, stereotypes and what made me think that this could even be a thing. I decided to come here and film outside because I've lived on my couch for the majority of the past month and I'm getting a bit stir crazy. I'm itching to do something. This way I can kind of take it easy. This is a super chill little path. Not a lot of people come here usually. So I thought it could be a nice way to get out of the house, get some vitamin D, fresh air, and also get started on this thing that I've been sort of working myself up about, but that I really want to do. I did write down some notes about things that I wanted to make sure I include. I did not suspect that autism would at all be a thing that I had until I was diagnosed with ADHD. That happened when I was about 27. I'm 30 now for reference. Getting diagnosed with that also took quite a long time. So I suspected I had ADHD probably since I was like 24, 25. Did eventually go through that process to get diagnosed. Got the diagnosis, started getting medicated for it, and it was a little bit around that point. It's not that other symptoms came about, it's just other things kind of came more to the surface. I had seen a lot of stuff online on social media, not just, one random video with some random symptom, and I'm like, oh my god, that's me, I have autism. It was probably like a year, 2 years of seeing a lot of relatable content regarding autism before I was like, that's all super familiar. Something about autism itself is, as you may know, it's a spectrum disorder. It's actually called autism spectrum disorder. A spectrum disorder does not mean that you are from 0 to 100% autistic. That is not what that means. The way it was explained to me that really made me understand it in a different way or see it in a different way was each person that is diagnosed with autism, they basically have their own boombox. Now think of a boombox, big beefy ones with the physical knobs, all that kind of stuff. Each one of us has a boombox. Each symptom or each part of autism is a separate knob, and every individual that has autism has all of those knobs to different percentages. Some of them might be at 0, some of them you may not experience at all, others might be 100. The difficulties you may face, it's a spectrum. It doesn't look the same for one person versus another. They're all different with differing levels of how much it impacts that individual. That really helped me understand that it's not just like, it's not a simple black and white thing, the way that a lot of people kind of understand it to be. Another term I had learned when I was kind of going through this period of contemplating if potentially this could be a thing is masking. You might have seen rhetoric about it online as well. You might have heard the term before. Masking is exactly what it sounds like. It's the ability to suppress your needs, your reactions, suppress a lot of yourself, your natural instincts, to fit in with other people. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot out of you to constantly be monitoring your every move, your every breath, your every word, how much eye contact you're making or not making. Are they aware that you're paying attention because you're not making the normal amount of eye contact? And it also brings you farther away from your true self. You can lose touch with your wants, your needs, who you are, because you're putting on this mask, you're putting on this facade to try and make other people more comfortable, or again, to try and get by in school without being picked on or differences being noticed about you. It's a tough thing. And also, not every person that's autistic can mask or will mask. And there's nuance to all of this. I'm not trying to be like the one voice of autism here either. It's a very different experience for lots of different people. But as someone who's diagnosed at 30, I thought that I could give my insight on all of these things, how I've come to understand it. In a way, I'm grateful that I was able to mask because it did make certain parts of my life easier in certain senses. But at the same time, it is really sad to think how much I hid myself throughout my life, how much I suppressed, how ashamed I was, how embarrassed I was of who I was, and how I felt I needed to change that. It makes me very sad when I look back on it. But it's also a big part of why I was never diagnosed. I was able to mask, and I was able to do it very well. A thing with women, girls that are autistic, that are on the spectrum, that are neurodivergent in general, same as non-neurodivergent girls, we're taught from a very young age to behave, to use our indoor voices, to be ladylike, to be polite. We're taught things that aren't really taught to boys the same way, or at least not as much emphasis on boys to do these things. I'm sure that's changing. I would like to think that gender side of it has changed over the years, but when I was growing up, it's boys will be boys, and then girls are supposed to be the polite ones. We understand some of these social norms better naturally than boys because there's so much more emphasis put on us to understand it. So because of that, a lot of women don't get diagnosed until they're later in life, until there are other symptoms that have come to the surface that are impacting their ability to function in some way, shape, or form, or they notice these big differences somewhere that they dig a little deeper, and it's through self-discovery that they find out these things. It's really crazy. It's changing a lot as well, like I said, but neurodivergence in women hasn't even been studied properly until the past 5 or 10 years, which is insane. It's absolute insanity. All of these things have opened up the talk about what neurodivergence can look like, what autism can look like, and how it's not just one simple image. Similarly, when I was growing up, autism was something that you could see, it's people that are nonverbal or have really, really high support needs. You can see their struggles, you can see their differences in some way, and so it's easier to diagnose, but it's much more complex than just visible symptoms. Like I said, it's a spectrum. It's been very eye-opening. I'm very grateful that we're having this knowledge now, but God, it would have been nice if this were the case 20 some odd years ago, The levels of autism. Some people don't agree with this. It is a newer classification level. It's only in North America, I believe. But back in the day, there was something called Asperger's. It was basically like autism light. It was like lower support needs autism. Socially, you understand more cues, that sort of thing. They realized that, again, it's a spectrum disorder and it's not so cut and dry. So Asperger's is not an actual diagnosis anymore. It's not valid in a clinical setting. What is now said is autism spectrum disorder, and if you live in certain parts of the world, you're level 1, 2, or 3. When I was diagnosed level 1. They told me that if I don't like the levels, I don't have to adopt them, I don't have to go by them. It's more so a way for other people to understand how your symptoms may impact your life. So level 1 autism basically means you have very low support needs, less overt symptoms, likely people that can mask. You can be more independent. Level 2 autism means just more support needs. You may have more overt symptoms. You probably were diagnosed earlier in life, again, not necessarily, but it really just comes down to support needs. It's a moderate in between when it comes to support needs. Part of why people don't like these levels, the level system, is because it really doesn't accurately paint a support needs picture. For me, my support needs change kind of by day or different periods of life. And being a low support needs autist doesn't mean that I don't still have support needs. You know what I mean? So some people don't like that. Part of me doesn't like it for those reasons, because again, I do think it varies, but it is helpful for other people to understand, I think. So level 3 autism is then very high support needs. You don't have a lot of independence, most likely. This is what nonverbal folk would be diagnosed with. You need a lot of assistance, a lot of help in daily life with pretty much all activities. This is a brief summary. There's no way I'm going to be able to fit everything that I want to say or could say or is out there in a single video. That would be impossible. So please give me some kindness. I'm not trying to overgeneralize. I'm just trying to give a little brief summary in case you really don't understand what I'm talking about. I don't want to invalidate anyone's experience. To my understanding, the way it was explained to me, that is the 3 levels of autism. The main things that made me think I could be potentially autistic. There's a lot of them. And again, it didn't just start overnight. It wasn't just like one little TikTok that I saw and I was like, oh my God, this is me. Sensory issues, first and foremost. Learning how sensory issues may feel. I kind of thought for most of my life that I was just someone that would get very overwhelmed very easily. I would have freakouts or panic attacks out in public, out in certain settings. Certain noises would, trigger me. I just kind of thought that I was sensitive. My dad is also sensitive. Clothing was always a big struggle. I would have so many meltdowns before elementary school, junior high. The second I would get home or get away from whatever social event, I would change immediately out of like my real people clothes. I was so uncomfortable in a lot of the clothing I would wear to try and, fit in, to look like my peers. I didn't understand how uncomfortable I was, and I guess I sort of assumed that everybody felt the same way, but that was really not the case. Another big thing for me was the social side of things, the masking social aspect of it. I thought for a long time that I had social anxiety, but it was much more complex than that. In the right setting, I would thrive. And I was often noted. A lot of people thought I was like, a social butterfly, or I could get along so easily with so many different people. But I was suffering internally. It might have been a skill that I got good at, but it was not always the case. Junior high me versus high school me was 2 entirely different people. One of them was much more masked than the other one. I knew, especially out of high school and stuff, that the way I was socializing was not the same as everybody else, in that I felt like I was performing the whole time. It felt like so much effort, so much energy. I would be exhausted, unable to really function for multiple days after certain hangs because I was so hyper vigilant. I'm thinking about my facial movements. Again, how much eye contact I'm making, how often I need to make sure that I'm checking back in because I hate making eye contact. I'm thinking about how much I'm nodding my head, make sure that I'm engaging enough to make sure that the person who's speaking to me thinks that I'm engaging with them. Really, for me to be engaged in a good way is me sitting here and not having to think about making eye contact. I would often be so focused on monitoring how I looked and how I was being perceived that I wasn't even fully in the conversation. Sometimes I would miss huge chunks of the conversation. I couldn't keep up as well because I was so focused on how I'm being perceived and, making sure that that is quote unquote normal. That I knew was a bit different, especially the level of it. I would often script. Before I'd hang out with people, I would think about different topics to bring up. I'd remind myself of things that I should bring up. That's the normal thing to bring up. I was really trying to overplan and just make it this strict thing because I didn't feel like I could just naturally socialize and that would be accepted by the person I was socializing with. When I was younger, like the junior high days, I spent so much of my time looking up how to fit in, ways to become popular, things that people like to talk about, ways to make people like you, ways to make a guy like you. I was trying to Google ways to fit in because I was not fitting in very well and really didn't seem to be able to grasp what to do or how to change that to fit in. Another thing, when I look back especially, is how much I copied other people. It was one of the biggest fights I would get in the various friends I had over the years when I was younger. I'd copy their every move and it was annoying. Obviously that was annoying. I was mimicking these things that I liked in people or that I saw value in because I thought that if I could be like them, then I'd be liked like them, or, I'd be normal. I'd be cool because they're cool. I knew that I was forgetting so many things. I've made a small list of some of the other main things. Temperature sensitivity, another sensory issue. Both heat and cold. In the same vein, really sensitive to the sun, like when it's snowing and the sun is also out, can't see. Also hate wearing sunglasses. Extreme hyperfixation. That's one of the pillars of autism. Not actually, but it's a big part of it. I have had very extreme hyperfixations, extreme obsessions, if you will, interest on different things, sure, but it has been a constant since I was very young. At one point, it was Barbies and then Bratz. It then kind of went to people. Hilary Duff was one of the first ones. I memorized her signature and I would sign my own things. My whole room was stuffed by Hilary Duff. I literally threw her a birthday party when I was in grade 6, I think. I think it was grade 6. I threw her a birthday party. After that, it was Miley Cyrus, Hannah Montana. That was kind of short-lived. And then it was Justin Bieber. And after that point, it's kind of been all over the place, because again, that was when I started really heavily masking, was after the Justin Bieber time. Anywho. Organizational differences, what I mean by this is like the way that I would organize and stack certain things, the way that I like to organize certain things. How can I best explain this? With candy, I still do it with candy. I can just like eat it willy-nilly if I'm out and about, if I'm with other people. However, my preferred method of eating candy is sorting it into the groups, like each color, each flavor, and then eating one by one the categories. Sometimes I've even put them in rows so that they all eventually equal the same number, and then eat slowly down like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just, the only way I know how to describe that is like organizational differences. Stimming. Duh, how should I not talk about stimming? I have a lot of different stims. Most of them are like covert stims, so flexing my muscles on and off, fidgeting with my fingers, fidgeting with my feet, cricket feet, that's a super common thing for me. And the biggest one throughout my whole life has been rubbing my baby blanket. It's now translated to rubbing clothing, rubbing my hair, and rubbing other comforters, blankets that I have around my apartment. I like to rub it between my fingers. I don't know why, it's a textile, sensory thing, but that's been like a main stim of mine since I was a child. A literal baby with my baby blanket. In the same vein as that, echolalia, or vocal stemming. I have always had vocal stems, or echolalia. It's like you hear something and it's not just, you know, getting a song stuck in your head. It would be like getting a word stuck in my head, not just a song, but certain words would be like stuck in my head. I feel like I would have to repeat them all the time. Either I'm repeating them out loud or I'm repeating them in my brain. The first one I can remember like distinctively is dachshund or dachshund. I remember like reading that and having that word stuck in my head for literally like 4 months, just constantly dachshund. I don't know. Meltdowns. I've had very severe meltdowns since I was a little kid, especially when I was a little kid. It's pretty clear to notice that they are indeed meltdowns. Being gullible or not getting jokes. I've gotten really good at this, obviously. Being able to understand when humor is a part of speech, or like when someone's being sarcastic, that kind of thing. I've learned to look for it more, but if I'm not expecting it, I'm very gullible. And jokes can sometimes go over my head because I take everything seriously. I take everything literally. Being hyperverbal. You've heard of nonverbal. Well, there's another end of it called hyperverbal. I think I've told this story before, but when I was very, very young in school, I was very talkative. It was something that was on all of my report cards, that I'm distracting to others because I'm so talkative. They once tried to move me away from my friends. Didn't matter. I was still chatting. So they took my desk and they put me in the front of the class. I was still chatting. They tried turning it so that I couldn't even face anyone in the class. I was still chatting. So then they put me out in the hallway and I started talking to anyone that would walk by, talking to myself, singing to myself. Hyperverbal. And then lastly, I have being highly emotional or empathetic or just sensitive, like rejection sensitive dysphoria, just sensitive in general with interactions, how I react to things. I cry very easily, especially at anything with a heightened emotion, like concerts, performances. When I was in cheer, I used to cry all the time. I can very easily cry because I feel things very intensely. Those are the ones that I've thought of since filming that clip, not that long ago. There's definitely more because again, it's so complex. I thought that I would include some of those because they're some of the bigger ones that I just entirely forgot about or forgot that I didn't include. Okay, anyways. Something that I will say, you may have heard me talk about some of these things and you might relate and you might think either, hey, maybe am I autistic, or that's not autism, we all have autism. Let me say this. One, you might have autism. You never know. Well, you could know. If you think that could be a thing, there's lots of things to do to figure it out. But it's not necessarily the presence of certain symptoms, but how impactful they are. So everyone can have some sensory issues at times, right? Nobody likes a scratchy sweater. Nobody likes wet socks, wet shoes. Of course, that's normal. It's how much it impacts your daily life and how intensely these reactions are to these things. So I've, again, come to learn that my experience with a lot of sensory issues, and I have a lot of them apparently, is not typical. It is not how everyone experiences things. It is not how my peers were experiencing things. It was because I was autistic and I didn't know it. If you do actually think that you may have autism, there are multiple online self-tests that you can do. A couple that I had done to sort of figure out if it was worth asking any other person. I hadn't brought this up to a soul because again, I was like, there's no way I'm autistic. There's no way that would be impossible, right? So here's some of the assessments that I did. I did the RADS-R. A score of 65 is the minimum where autism is considered. A score of 90 or above is a strong indication that there's autism, but it does not necessarily mean that autism is present. And then a score of 130 and above means that there's very, very strong evidence for autism. When I did this test myself, I scored a 123. Another one I did was the AQ. I got a score of 31. Any score of 26 or greater indicates the presence of autistic traits. 80% of autistic folks score 32 or above, and 92.3% of females will score 32 or above. So I got 31 on that one. Not quite hitting that threshold. But something you have to keep in mind as well when you're doing these tests is that a lot of them aren't set out to look for masking. Some of them are. Some of them are more for like a masked individual. But unless you understand ways that you may be experiencing certain difficulties or deficits, there could be some questions where you answer no when the answer is actually yes. You know what I mean? So all of this is to be taken with a grain of salt. It's sort of just a way to figure out if maybe you should dig a little deeper. Another one that I did is the CAT-Q. I scored a 158. The average female autism spectrum disorder score is around 124. I did another couple that I didn't have the name saved, but they were all on, I'll put the website here and I'll also link it down below. Embracing Autism might be the website. There's a website and they had just a bunch of different quizzes, so I did a bunch of them. And then lastly, I went through the DSM-5. That's the book of diagnostic criteria for different mental health disorders, illnesses, all of the likes. You've probably heard of it. If you've been in any kind of therapy, you've probably heard of it. I did also go through the ASD criteria on the DSM-5. There was a girl actually that did a separate set of videos on TikTok where she was going through each of the sections. There's like A1, A2, A3, a B1 to 4, a C and a D, something like that. So I went through all of those through these videos. They were great. They were fantastic. If I can find those again, I'll also put them down below. And I just noted everything that I felt was an experience for me. That one is much more of just like using your own discretion, but I did find that going through those examples sort of helped me realize some of the examples or ways that maybe I was misunderstanding how autism was in my life. Like there was a certain symptom that maybe I'd read like, oh, I don't have that, I don't experience that. But when it's worded in another way or given another example, I was like, oh, wait, maybe I do then. You know, that is going to be the end of this portion. Segment 1. Done. As I said, this is not like an end-all be-all. I know everything about autism. That's not what I'm trying to do or claim here. Again, this is just my personal experience, the way that I've come to understand things, and I still have a lot to learn. It's still a newer experience for me. So if you have some more insight, or maybe something that I worded a little funky, or something that could be worded better, you let me know down below. Very open to that. I'll see you in segment 2. Welcome to segment 2. I am not long out of the shower. I thought for this portion I could chat with you while I get ready. Do my very simple, everyday type makeup. Like I said, this segment is going to be about the diagnostic process, how I went about getting diagnosed, the steps that led up to it, what that whole process looked like. That's this section. As I mentioned, I have been diagnosed with ADHD. That happened when I was like 27, I believe. And it was actually around that time, a little after my diagnosis, that I switched therapists. In addition to ADHD, she had also diagnosed me with PTSD, or CPTSD I should say, that related to some childhood trauma. That is definitely still a piece to this puzzle, and I think is part of why I went from, being able to function pretty well to not so well. I was undiagnosed neurodivergence, but I also genuinely went through some traumatic stuff. One of the reasons we switched therapists was to start EMDR therapy, if you know what that is. I still haven't started it to this day, fun fact, but in switching therapists, we found somebody that specializes in both trauma and neurodivergence. One of the things that I had opened up to her about was that I suspected autism could potentially be a thing. I felt very nervous to even say that because I felt so ridiculous, because I'm aware that based on stereotypes, I would not fit that mold. So she asked me why I felt that way, what made me think that I was potentially autistic. I went over lots of different things that we had just talked about, and she felt there was enough there that it could be beneficial to go seek a potential diagnosis to get the assessment done. She also realized that it would probably be beneficial for me even if I were to not get a diagnosis, so that I wasn't kind of questioning back and forth if this was something that I could be experiencing, if that makes sense. She asked if I would want to go through the assessment process. I said, yeah, I totally would like to do that. Learned it's very expensive, big surprise. In Canada, it's It's about $4,000. It can be a little more than that, but there is funding that you can get through our government. In my case, I live in Newfoundland, so it was through the provincial government. She actually had a contact for one of the people that was in charge of like the admin side. So she got in touch with them, letting them know that I was looking to get funding. What they require is 1 to 2 letters from a practitioner of sorts. In my case,
my therapist.
That sufficed for her. She's a social worker. She was able to provide a note. And in addition to that, you also provide a letter basically outlining why you think that you should be going through the assessment process, what makes you think that you could have autism, and how it would benefit you to go through the assessment process. So we got that set in motion. This was quite a long time ago now. Everything takes a very long time, especially in Canada where it's free. But we sent in the application. I wrote a very detailed letter outlining all the different ways that I think I could potentially have autism and how it would be very beneficial for me to learn if I do or do not, as it's a big part of my life right now, at that time at least, figuring out what my diagnoses actually are. Like I said, I was diagnosed with PTSD before. I've now diagnosed ADHD. Growing up, it was the classic depression, anxiety. One doctor thought that I had some characteristics of BPD, so it was just kind of all over the place. And a very complex case, given the trauma and now that we know the neurodivergence. Point of the matter, in my life, I was having a lot of struggles. I have been in and out of school since graduating high school. I've had so many different jobs, none of which have lasted long term. I'm now currently unemployed. And so I thought, while I'm unemployed, how about I really try my dang hardest to figure out my brain so that when I want to get back out there, I'm much more equipped. You know, hopefully we won't be falling into these continuous cycles of productivity, burnout, because that's what it felt like my life had become. I'd say like a month, maybe 2 months went by when I was waiting for them to review my application for the funding. I did get approved. So that wasn't obvious at this point. I did get approved. I did get approved. And it honestly felt like the first bit of like validation in a sense. The fact that the government was willing to give me $3,000 to potentially seek this diagnosis, that they thought there was enough there to give the funding. It was a really big win for me. It felt very validating, especially given I had felt there wasn't really anyone in my life that kind of thought that that could be a thing, at least at that time. My dad, it's not that he was against it, he just didn't really understand what autism can actually look like. I can't blame him there. But like the past friends that I had, I had tried to bring it up to a few people over the years, and it just seemed like I was kind of laughed at. And I get it. I do get it to an extent because, again, it's a very misunderstood disorder. Either way, getting that yes felt very, very nice. Once I got that yes, it was then up to me to find a place to do the assessment itself. I really wanted to make sure I chose wisely here because, again, being like a highly masked individual, I really wanted to make sure it was someone that was willing to dig very deep, someone that really understands human behavior and could see past any potential masking. The place I ended up going with is called Repose, and they seem to have the most thorough assessment process. I was both reading about them on their website. I also contacted someone there to ask about the fees, that I had funding for it, what that would look like, and also asked what their process looked like. I was explained that it's a pretty lengthy process, but they don't just have one person doing your assessment. They have like a team of people pretty much that have different expertise, one of which was a speech pathologist. That really intrigued me. And they were also one of the places that seem to be versed in, you know, the late diagnosed person, or what it would look like if you have went your whole life without being diagnosed, and neurodivergence in women. So that's who I went with. I put my trust in them, and I'm really, really glad I did. I had a wonderful experience there. I really cannot recommend them enough. The people that did my assessment, they were wonderful. It was a really nice spot itself. Just overall, very, very good. They do ADHD assessments as well. They do regular kind of therapy. They do lots of things there. Okay, the process itself. Overall, start to finish, from when I had my first appointment to when I got the diagnosis, was about 2 months. So it really was not just like they do one appointment, you fill out one questionnaire, and they're like, yep, here's your diagnosis. They're very thorough, and they don't want to give a false diagnosis, of course, nor did I want a false diagnosis. With some of the rhetoric you see online, it's like people think that people that are out here getting these late diagnoses, like we want to have these things. Like I wanted to be autistic, and that really wasn't the case. It was that the way that my life was going, I thought that I was just a failure. I thought that I was just like broken and wasn't capable of doing doing anything the way other people are wasn't normal, and learning that I had autism, it really changed the narrative. It changed how I see myself, how I view my capabilities, and all that kind of stuff. Either way, I'd say I had 8 appointments, somewhere in that range. Some of them were shorter, some were quite lengthy. And it wasn't, again, just one straight thing they were doing. They had like a whole rubric that they were following with all different kinds of tests. The 3 different assessors that I had, one was a psychologist, another was a speech pathologist, as mentioned, and the third girl, I can't remember her title, it says CCC, which is it's either a certified counselor or it's basically a coordinator. But she did also do a lot of the interview side things, so I do think that she's like a certified counselor. Regardless, the things that they did throughout this process, there's a few interviews, so a few was, like I said, just sitting down, talking. They had some prompts, but I'm very talkative. Like I said, I'm hyperverbal, so I was able to fill in a lot of information. Naturally, questions came about just to get a better idea of me and how I operate, my history. They went through all of my report cards from elementary school all the way up to high school. They reviewed the letter that I had sent in, the initial letter that I sent to get the funding, and then the actual titles of the bigger type tests that they did. The first one is called the MIGDIS 2, which is an interview for individuals with verbal fluency. There is another version, the MIGDIS, I guess it's like the MIGDIS 1, that is for if you're nonverbal. The next one was the ADOS 2, that's like the autism test that most people have done. Not most people. If you get an autism assessment, there's probably some version of the ADOS that you're doing. That was one of the bigger ones. That was like a 3.5 hour appointment. Also really strange. Some of the things you have to do, it was the weirdest test I had ever taken. Certain things were just like, making certain shapes out of blocks, but other things were like, you had to narrate a story that was just a picture book to the best of your ability, like how you're perceiving things. One of the tests had to do with different objects being laid out, and the practitioner was observing which ones I was playing with or what ones I had interest in. It was really intriguing. I had no idea what that was going to say about me and my life, but it was very intriguing. Other than that, there was also an SRS2. I think that's like a self-report and then an observer report. So that was like an online quiz. One portion I did, another portion my dad did on his own. CEFI, Comprehensive Executive Function Inventory. One of the last like kind of beefier ones is called the WAIS 5. It's basically an IQ test. There are other functions for it that's outside of like an autism assessment. That was also super, super intriguing, and I did get an IQ score afterwards. I'm not going to share it, but I was not upset. It feels weird to share that, so I'm not going to, but I've had a lot of fear for my life that I'm like actually stupid, and I have just been like hiding it really well, and it made me feel better that my IQ does not show that I'm stupid. That's a positive. Anywho, the last like formal type test, it's a more structured interview, and that's based on the DSM-5. It's still an interview, but they have certain questions that are more derived from the DSM-5. So not just a general open-end natural conversation. So we did all of these different things over the span of 2 months. It was a lot. Also the not knowing for so long, they had to review everything that they had seen, everything that we had done. They had to go over it as a team, and at the end of it, we had an appointment. They had said beforehand, actually, I was kind of racking my brain. It took a bit of time, obviously, for them to review everything, and I was really in my head about it. There's certain things that I felt, really fit, obviously, or I would not have went through that process, but of course you're in your head like, what if I just like wasted these people's time, and like, what if this was foolish of me? What if I'm really off base here and I don't get the diagnosis? Like, how is that gonna feel? I kind of went into it thinking that I was probably going to get a diagnosis, if I'm being candid. But especially towards the end of the waiting period, I was really starting to doubt myself. She emailed me and she had said before our appointment, I don't think you're going to be super shocked by any of the results, which to me was kind of like the confirmation that she was going to give me a diagnosis. And she did. I went in that day. It was a Saturday morning, actually. They had a 31-page document that outlines the entire assessment, their findings, why they did certain things. Basically, 31-page document outlining my autism, and it was really, really intriguing. 31 pages. I was doubting it, and they were kind of like, no, you're definitely autistic. You have that. You have autism. I was like, I do. Okay. It was pretty odd, I will say, like the initial having it set in, like having someone confirm it that is versed in it. And it was a bit of a trip. I felt kind of like it didn't set in for a bit of time, that I'd sought this out and I was correct and I now had a diagnosis. Like it was kind of bizarre for a little bit there. I'm saying it like I had like a bad reaction. That's not the case. I had a really positive reaction, actually. I was pretty much like Smiles McGee the entire appointment, but that was mainly because it was very affirming. It was very validating. I was really unsure of myself. I had brought it up to some people who really made me feel even less sure of myself. It's a pretty common experience for us late diagnosed folk, be that ADHD or autism. You're pretty invalidated for a lot of your experience growing up, especially at home. Neurodivergence is hereditary. It doesn't just come out of the blue. It has to come from someone in your family. So chances are, if you're undiagnosed, your parent is probably also undiagnosed, and therefore they think that these differences you have are normal. So you're taught that that's just normal. Everyone deals with that. And that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of nuance to that, of course, but that was definitely my experience. I've been very invalidated that these kind of extreme difficulties that I was having, or these big differences, I was just told that that's just the way things are. Everyone experiences that, and I didn't understand why it was so hard for me, why I couldn't just be normal or just function properly or XYZ. I was really, really, really down on myself for a very long time. The better half of my life, my adult life, late teen to adult life, has been me really confused and trying so hard to get by and fit in and be normal and just do what everyone else is doing and feeling like I can't. And I don't know why. It answered a lot of questions, and that was why I wanted to do this, because the more I learned about it, the more it was like, this would really make a lot of sense. The math is kind of adding up for a lot of these different things. It is a shame that I wasn't diagnosed sooner and then couldn't start doing things that were more true to me and helping myself in ways I didn't know could be helpful a lot sooner, but I'm trying not to let myself go down that path, because that's the negative side of things is, hey, why did nobody figure this out sooner? Why did I have to figure this out myself at the age of 30? Like, that can be a hard thought, but overall, it's been a really positive experience. I'm gonna finish this off camera. It's literally just eyebrows. You've seen me do it a million times, if you've seen me before. If not, so sorry, but you're not missing anything crazy. I'll finish this up, and then we'll get into segment 3. How I'm coping with it, what it means now, and the path ahead. One moment. Like I said, nothing crazy. Here's so ass. It has been many weeks since the last clip that I filmed. Maybe a month. Maybe more than a month. I actually don't know how long it's been, but it's been some time. I'm gonna have a sip of water. So, if you do not know, there is no medication for autism. There's medications you can take for other parts of autism. Some people on the spectrum will take antidepressants, or I've even heard of like mood stabilizers, sometimes antidepressants with a mood stabilizer. People that are ADHD, like myself, will sometimes take ADHD medication. Not always the case. I take ADHD medication, for example, and I'm also already on an SSRI. Escitalopram, where my Lexapro baddies at. I've been on it for many years now. It's the one that I've been on the longest. I've tried many of them, like over 10 of them, not just SSRIs, but different forms of antidepressants since I was like 14. Not the point of this. There's no medication for autism, but there's medications that can be used to treat parts of autism, potentially, depending. Aside from that, it really is just about accommodations. I feel like that's the theme of this video. I know they might be like, what do you mean accommodations? It's just that can look so different for so many different people. But in my case, for example, it means, first of all, having the people that are in my close circle, that are in my life, reading my autism assessment report to get to know me a little better, and then maybe being more lenient with me, being more understanding or a little bit more patient. Not to say that everyone has to bend over backwards around you, but I have a bit of anxiety talking about this topic in general, if you can't tell. But that's one thing. Another is like my therapist. I already have a therapist. I've been in therapy for a long time. So having her read the report and then being able to dictate how we move forward, have better informed practices, different treatment paths that maybe we wouldn't have tried, to build off of that, to remove certain potential treatment options because it probably won't fit someone who is autistic. It's also honoring your needs and not in like the trendy way that is popular with like self-care TikTok and all that kind of stuff. Some of it, yes, but more so like your sensory needs. More honoring those by wearing clothing that you find comfortable, not necessarily clothing that you think will make you look a certain way, if I can say it like that.
wearing noise canceling headphones if that's helpful for you. Maybe not going to certain spaces because you know that they are something that you just do not enjoy and they bring about a really unpleasant sensory experience. If you're sensory seeking, finding more things that work for you and doing them more often, implementing them into your life, whether that be something as simple as like fidgets, or whether that's getting like the human happy sock, or different additions to your home, different tools that you can use when you're sensory seeking or have sensory overload. Having more procedures, just being more prepared for when things can get difficult, being more aware of what things can bring about different problems for you, and learning how to cope with that. It's really just learning yourself, understanding yourself better, and not the version of you that's like, I need to be XYZ because I need to fit in and blah, blah, blah. Like your actual self, the one that you've probably suppressed for a long time. If you've been masking for a long time, like myself, it's getting to know your real self again, getting back to your actual interests and letting yourself have those special interests, not dulling so much of yourself and not trying to mold yourself into this person that you're not, because it's very taxing and is usually at the expense of yourself. I'm already going off on a tangent here. This assessment and getting the diagnosis has opened the door for accommodations in the sense that like they've given me different avenues to go down, different things to apply to, different routes to go. Some you have to pay for, some you don't, some that are local, some that are online. They've given me a list of tools to go and look for things that are going to be helpful for me. And in addition to the assessment itself, the report, that's something that I can give to any future employer, or if I were to go back to school at some point, for example, I can give that to them. But if I'm not comfortable with giving that to them, they do also have a separate letter that I can give that they've written up explaining that I need certain accommodations. They have a list of them as well. For example, more frequent breaks. If you're in a school setting, being able to write in an alternate setting, potentially additional time. There's just a lot of information about what an accommodation could look like for me. Almost an overwhelming amount. Not just in the report, but when you're looking it up, it's, again, very, very complex and can look so different for so many different people that there's so many different routes to go, which is why it's like, you just use the word accommodations because that could mean so many different things. Getting the diagnosis was great for that reason, but as I've mentioned many times now, I did suspect this for quite a while and have like really actually suspected it for probably like 1 to 2 years. And in that time frame of like really kind of taking it more serious, I figured, what's the harm of implementing some of these accommodations you can make for yourself or different supports you can try out on your own, because that's what you would be doing if you do get the diagnosis anyways. So I do feel a bit like ahead of the curve in that sense with a lot of these things because I've already done so many things to accommodate myself. For example, I did invest in a pair of noise canceling headphones like 2 years ago now. They are a great help in so many different instances. Sometimes being in my apartment, if there are certain noises outdoors, if there's something going on upstairs or construction in the area that's loud, even just having them to wear around my house sometimes is helpful. I have been much more accommodating to the way that I dress, and that I have much more of the loungewear, Adam Sandler-esque attire, much more than I dress up. In fact, when I dress up is when I tend to have the most meltdowns. I still am definitely struggling in the masking category in a lot of ways, but I'm at least aware that these things can bring about a meltdown, and I'm figuring out ways to combat it. I did order some clothing, and I've thrifted some stuff that I know that I'll actually wear that's comfortable. I'm not trying to push myself out of my comfort zone, or I'm not splurging here and there on like these really cute, interesting pieces that there might be some occasion that I can wear it and it'll be this cool thing. Like, I'm much less even looking at clothing like that these days because it's just, it's gonna be a waste of money. It'll probably just sit in my closet. I'll probably try it on a million times, feel bad, maybe wear it out, then feel weird out. Like, it's just not worth it. So anywho, not going to certain things, again, allowing more rest for yourself. Obviously, that's been a thing for me for the past multiple years. I haven't been working. It's literally been a little over 2 years now since I've actually worked a job, which is crazy. I know there's probably a lot of people out there, I don't know if they're watching this video, but there's definitely a lot of people out there that are like, you haven't worked in 2 years, you're a 30-year-old woman, like, what the fuck? And I'm aware that that's not the standard path, nor is that a super accepted path, but it's the one that I'm on, and it's necessary, unfortunately, at this time, for me to have my life kind of dumbed down to the bare minimum, the basics. And I am so lucky that I can, with the people in my life, with the support that I have. So, like, don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful that I'm able to be unemployed at the moment. I'm also on social assistance, also known as welfare. That is technically the main form of income that I have, but given my low income status and given I'm technically considered disabled due to my mental health, I've been approved for the disability tax credit For example, I'm in Canada, so that's something that you can get. They also recently came out with a benefit monthly, so I get a little bit of additional money because I'm considered disabled, in addition to social assistance, in addition to the help from my family. So again, I'm very blessed in a lot of senses, but not working was an accommodation. I would love to get back to work. That's kind of like the goal. Me and my therapist, that is the goal, is to get back to some form of normalcy. Do I think I'll ever work a full-time job again? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure, but I would like to get back to working in some way, shape, or form eventually. Just right now, this is what makes the most sense, especially because if I start working, I lose certain benefits. AKA, I'd have to pay so much money for things like prescriptions that it doesn't make sense to even go back to. Anyways, not what this video is about. If you have questions about that kind of stuff, put them down below. That's the main treatment path. Just learning yourself and then accommodating around the things that you learn and being more realistic with yourself, not trying to fit the mindset or the mold that you have been trying to that has led you to this point. At least, again, in a circumstance like mine, if you're someone that has heavily masked and been masked their whole life, it's very hard to unmask. That's another, if you have like a jot list of like, here's what you have to do for yourself. First, accommodations. Bullet point under accommodations, learn to unmask. If you mask, learn to unmask. I'm definitely still struggling with that. I'm getting a little better in little doses. I've definitely still made a lot of progress, but I do still naturally have that urge to kind of hide away or to do the people please type thing because it's so foreign to me to like be my full self in fear of being rude or being misunderstood. I feel very misunderstood. I've always felt very misunderstood. And it's one of the things that can dysregulate me the most is feeling like I'm misunderstood. But yeah, and again, I do have the letters that I can bring to any future employment opportunities if I go back to school. I've had those thoughts more in the past 6 months than I've had since I last quit school. I did graduate high school. I did like 5 or maybe 6 years of university. Eventually did get into biochem. Nutrition was my focus. Had like maybe half of that degree complete. And I said, nope, I can't do this. I didn't say that. My brain gave out. As it has, time and time again, for like as long as I can remember. Because of the cycles of burnout. Anywho, I think that's about everything. I've been a little anxious making this, editing this. It's why it's taken so long. I mean, I'm notorious at this point for taking really long breaks in between videos. Sometimes I go through phases where I'm really great at posting and then I fall off. Part of that is, again, learning myself and what I'm capable of. I've seen some rhetoric videos of people being like, oh, these people getting diagnosed with autism and now suddenly they're experts and trying to tell others how to live their life. And like, I get it, especially if you're someone that has been diagnosed with autism a long time. I'm sure in certain senses, it's great that more people are getting their diagnoses and that like it's becoming a more talked about thing in different lights and shedding more light on the reality of it, the actual reality of it. But at the same time, I'm sure it's also like every other day there's this new expert online with all these tips of how to live your life with these things that they're newly getting diagnosed with that is still, again, so misunderstood. I can understand that, but as someone who learned so much about it from online people, and again, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. You cannot just trust anyone that you're seeing online, even me. Like, there could very well be things that I'm misinformed on and have passed that along. So like I have said, I don't want to be this like, I am the voice of autism and I understand it and I'm gonna tell you how to change your life because this is how I'm gonna change. Like, it's really just trying to share my experience with it and, you know, update anyone that does keep up with me in my videos and I talk about mental health stuff, or I want to or try to talk about mental health stuff, almost like a little video diary, just a dump of getting diagnosed and all the different things about it. Anyways, I don't need to re-explain what you just watched if you've made it this far. If anyone's made it this far, I love you. 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 These words of my own. You know, thank you so much for caring, truly. I'm going to put a comment. I don't know if you can pin on Facebook. Really aging myself. Not sure if you can pin a comment on YouTube anymore, but if you can, I'm going to pin a comment. If you have any questions at all about anything regarding me, regarding my thoughts on things, any follow-up cues based on anything that I talked about, like any questions about anything at all, you can put down there. If there's enough of them, maybe I'll make an FAQs type video or, you know, just do my best to answer them regardless. Just put them down below if you have any questions. I'm probably gonna get back to some more lighthearted stuff because I've been so in my head about this video. Oh, I love the sound of the rain. Vlogging is like, first of all, I find it really fun, and second of all, it's a lot easier and less, I get less in my head about it than stuff like this. Heavier, bigger type videos. So I'm probably going to keep it light for the next few videos. I did get a new tattoo since I last saw you. It's still healing. I'm getting another one tomorrow, randomly. This girl that is super cool that I've wanted to get tattooed by for many years now. Her name is Maddie Poking. I'll put her stuff here. She was really great. She had like a flash deal going on, so this was 100 buckaroons. And I love it, and I'm gonna get another one tomorrow. So I thought maybe I'll even take you along for that. We'll have a silly little summer vlog, lighthearted fun, and just hang out again. And if I have any updates, I'll update you, but I don't really have any updates because this has really been the update, and my life is pretty boring. Actually, it's been less boring. I've been doing some stuff again. I've been trying to be a person and being in person on occasion. And I've been uploading more short videos, if you didn't notice. I'm just saying. There's other places that I also upload short videos and pictures. On one of these platforms, I will be posting on some frequent basis. So if you really are intrigued, you can check me out here or here as well. This is weird. It's really pouring, so I'm gonna get inside. I'd say before it gets any worse, but it's really starting to rain. Like I'm gonna be soaked going in, but that's fine. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did, in any capacity, if you're someone that keeps up all the time, I appreciate you so much. I'm sorry that I'm so bad at keeping up with regular videos. I'm such a head case. I'm in my head a lot. I'm thinking a lot, and I can overthink and spiral sometimes. And then when I'm like that, I just don't do anything. I lie on the couch like a potato for who knows how long and avoid it like the plague because I'm not the best at coping with a lot of things still, but I'm getting better, and we're gonna keep getting better, and I hope to make more content about this, more videos about this, have more chats about it. Again, if you have any questions, put them down below. Thank you again. If you made it this far, give it a big old thumbs up. I would appreciate it so much. It means the world that you're here. It really does. I hope that I will hear from you in the comments, or see you next time. Thank you. Love you. See you hopefully very soon. That's real nice. Okay, bye.